I'll primarily take up the some of the application components that you would be required to submit when you're applying to some of these deferred MBA programs. And starting off, say, so some of the main components are, definitely the college undergraduate GPA that you have, the LORs that you'd be submitting through your like internship experience or anything that you've done during your undergrad. Apart from that, a major chunk is your GRE, GMAT, and also finally the essays. And the rest of it, of course, there are more finer aspects to it, the resume, the profile that you build, and a lot of other stuff. But I think Kopal and Rohan would be taking that next after we are done with some of the application components with respect to the things that I mentioned. So like taking up firstly like the GPA, I think a lot of people would think about as it's a competitive program, you would require like a over the top, like a top 10%, top 1%, you have to be a batch topper for applying to these programs. To some extent it would be true, but it's not generally the case when you are applying to all of these programs. So it's not that you can't get in with the 8 pointer or even like a like 8.57 or all of that stuff. It just becomes a bit tough because you need to put yourself into the seats of when with whom are you competing basically. So right now, if you are at any undergraduate college, you would also be competing with everyone else who is not just from India but also from different nations from all parts of the country, and they would be coming in with a lot of them might be dash toppers or all of that. So you need to keep that in perspective, that or be cognizant that if you have like a lower GPA, you can still apply and there is a possibility that you can still get in. The only thing is you would have to compensate or show the application the admissions committee that how are you still better or how are you unique basically as compared to someone who is coming in with a great higher GPA than you or has more internships and all of that stuff. So one part of it can be compensated through the GRE GMAT, which we can discuss next. But I think generally I want to put that an idea forward that whatever your GPA is, it's recommended to have it on the higher end. For perspective, like I had an 8.1 when I was applying, and Kopal and Roel can also share their GPAs, but I think you can apply, and I know people who've gotten in with a 7.3, 7.5 as well. The schools might differ, and there's a lot of factors that go into deciding whether you'll get in or not. But don't look at it at a singular level that if you have say X GP you can't get in. All sorts of profiles have gotten in, and you can get an idea by looking at the school website what their average is there, and they also give you a range. But that's a bit about the GPA thing. And secondly, as I was saying, that if you are concerned about you have a lower GPA, you can obviously compensate that through your GRE or GMAT scores. And I think would want to mention that I think a lot of people have misconceptions about. Some people might think about that GMAT is the exam which is supposed to be given when you're applying for MBA application, that is preferred by the admissions committee and all of that. I think there is not a lot of evidence to that, and even if you feel that that is something that you want to take into perspective, just give what I always recommend is just give the mocks for both of the exams, see what fits best for you. Because say you're getting like a 730 in GMAT and you're getting like a 333, or you're scoring basically significantly better at the GRE, there would be no reason why someone would prefer you when you have a lower GMAT score versus someone who has a higher GRE score in the percentile level. So see what fits best into you, best for you. For example, to give like share a personal example as well, I started off with my GMAT prep, I think, and I took 1 month or so, and my verbal wasn't improving a lot. I did talk to a lot of people, and I realized that some people had made that switch after just 1 month of GMAT. They felt that okay, even though I prepped for it, I would have to change the exam, and what if I'm scoring still the same? And they did mention that GRE was much better for them, suited to them. It's not that one exam would be easier, one exam would be tougher. It's very personal. One exam would be very easy maybe for you, but it could be difficult for the other person. So I gave the mock for GRE. I felt that it's much suited to what I know of and I can get better at. And then I prepped again for a 1 month or two or so, and then I was able to get a 330 on my GRE, which was a quant full on quant, and then 160 on the verbal side. I think the basic recommendation is any exam would work. Don't think too much into that. GMAT is the only exam that I have. Give the mocks for both of them, see where you feel, firstly what is the baseline score that you're getting, and secondly where you feel you will be able to make those improvements much easier. Where which exam is that one? Because there are significant differences, and now there's also the focus edition and multiple other changes. So keep get keep yourself updated and see where you feel you would be able to score the best. I think that should be the strategy for GRE or the GMAT. And so that's one, the other component. Thirdly, if we are coming to let me first cover, say, the LORs. So I think all of these schools would have different, requirements for the LOR. Some have like a same, some would have like a similar format where you could submit the same LOR. Some could have a different format. Also, some of the schools have different requirements in terms of the quantity. So Columbia specifically just has one LOR requirement. I think Booth, Kellogg, and some of the other schools, they would have a two LOR requirement as well. I think the idea and some of the misconceptions I would also want to clear here are that, a lot of people would recommend you to have the LOR from the managing director at your firm, or the CEO of the firm, or anyone who's very senior. I think that is a second level thing that will only add as much as value if they know you better. I think the first priority that you need to have is the can the person talk about you in a deeper level? Have they worked with you in different settings, and can they speak about your strengths and weaknesses? If the LOR that you're getting from a person hasn't worked with you and they're just at a higher position, that wouldn't work, and that because that wouldn't be deep enough. They are seeking for something that is very unique in your profile. They want to know more about you. It's not just that they look at the designation and feel like, okay, that is the person who's recommended them, but the LOR can't speak anything about you and it's just a generic one. That wouldn't help. It'll only help if you feel that you have had some connect with that person, and if they are senior, that's an added benefit. But don't go with the person that, I'll just ask my manager that can they get an LOR from, someone higher up, and that'll help your case. It won't. Because, and again, sharing a personal example, I was someone who had just interned at Titan Capital, and I had done multiple internships after that as well. I took the only LOR that I submitted for Columbia was just the Titan Capital LOR, and the person that I like the person who had submitted that LOR was just my direct manager, who was a senior associate there. I had an option of getting it submitted through the partner and someone, the principal as well, but I didn't do that specifically because they couldn't talk about a lot about, how I have thrived in situations, what were my weaknesses, where I had improved. So it wouldn't be as strong enough. So if you have the option of getting it from someone senior, but you can do that, but keep in mind that would they be able to talk about you in a manner that someone who's your direct manager is that if that is the case, then maybe go ahead for it. But keep into mind that the content matters a lot more than the designation. And secondly, I think I would also want to share some insight on how you should manage that those LORs in a way that, so if you have like an application where you're submitting two LORs, it there is a way that you should do it. And I think this is something that I learned again, that if you have two LORs, it is very common that they would have, as they have similar questions, they could portray you as a similar person talking about the same thing, and you would also be feel like that, okay, I should portray something which is talking about my leadership skills, and both of them would talk about the same things. I think something that I had learned was they ideally should be talking about different aspects of yourself. One could be very academic, one could be very, related to your work ex. And I think that is also something that I want to I'll come on later about, whether you should choose an academic or a like a professional LOR. But the idea is that both of the LOR should, even though they are portraying the same person, eventually it should feel like they're talking about the same person. They should talk about different qualities about you. You should have, or you should choose your LORs or recommenders in such a fashion that they're talking about different aspects of you. Now, one part of it can be solved through that you have one professor that who's submitting your LOR, and the second one could be your work ex or your professional LOR. But don't feel that that is the recommended thing or that is the best thing that you are doing, because check with the applications committee. From what I remember, when I was submitting two LORs for some of these schools, they hadn't mentioned on their website what is their preferred thing. I had mailed them and they replied back that their preference actually was to get both of them as professional LORs. And that was the case with me, where I did not personally know any professor, so I did not have any arrangement for academic LORs. So that was a relief for me. And in case that is the case for you, please be confident and just apply for both professional LORs if you have that. if you have academic, it's not that you'll not get in. There's just very minor factors, and I think Kopal, Rohan would also, step in and they would tell you about that. They would have a different experience. They would have submitted academic LOIs as well. There's no one thing that it'll get you and get, or it would hamper your chances. Just the idea is just share what you feel is the best thing about your profile. If it's through academic, then give that. If that's through professional law, then do that. But check with the school, check with what your profile is, and maintain a balance is the point. So that was about the LOIs. And I think lastly about the essays, I think it's again a broader topic about, that every school would have very different essays topics and all of that. But I think the main idea there to keep in mind is, firstly, what are they looking for? The entire process of the essay thing is to basically judge whether you are the right person for the school, and secondly, are you academic, whether you would fit in academically within the school's environment, what the school's values are. And then secondly is, can the school support you enough, whether the school has the right resources for your career path and all of that. So they generally do it, they would have different formats of essay questions, and everyone will have a different question and even word limits and all of that. But they would it would you could broadly bucket it into the first essay being a lot about what do you know about the school, and the second would be, they is something that you want to share about yourself as a story, or something about your learnings, about your background and all of that. So in the first essay, which is about the school, they basically, you would want to structure it in a way where you want to paint that story of what your pre-MBA work is, how the school will be helping you to achieve your post-MBA goals. You should research a lot about the school's employment reports, what are the past alumni, how did they go through their profile. And I think the anchor to that is basically, you should talk to a lot of people, not just people who've gotten deferred MBA admits, just current students and also alumni, because they would be able to tell you more about how did they use their resources, how is it currently currently place the resources, where is the class currently getting placed and all of that. And that is one thing for the essay that you do, and secondly also for yourself, where you feel, okay, is this the right school for me? You might get into all of them and you feel like the fifth school was a school that you wanted to get in, and these all four schools, even though they are very highly branded and all of that, they don't fit in with your values and things that you want to do later on. And that is very common. So do that exercise, talk to a lot of people so that you know a lot about the school. So that would be the first essay. And I think the second essay would be a bit more about, what do you want to share with them apart from your resume, GPA, GMAT and all of that. Because as it's document submitting, you aren't submitting a lot about, you're not having a conversation at the first step of the application. So they wouldn't know about who you are as a person just from the resume and all of that. So you need to give them more insight about who you were as a person, how did you change, what are your ambitions, not just professionally but outside as well. To give you an example, again, I started off with telling them how I came from. I'm situated currently at my hometown, which is Surat, and they probably don't know what Surat is. I gave them an insight about Surat. Is a smaller city where you don't have any corporate scene. It's just all family businesses that are situated here, and everyone who goes for education, they want to come back to the family business and all of that. So that is just background setting, that who you are as a person, what is the society, what is the Marwadi community, what is the Punjabi, or whatever your religion, and all of that. Those are all valid points, and something that, if that ties up with your entire story. So that is how I think you should think about the second essay, which is not just about your professional achievements, because they already have your resume. Don't talk about things that you've done at internship, how it was very good at, and all of that. Think about how they match with your values. And I think the main thing to also cover there is that it should all be coherent in a way that when you're starting your school or wherever you want to start that story till the time you're applying and what you're planning to do later on, it should all be in a coherent fashion. And sure, you would want to explore and all of that, but give them a person who has well thought about his career decisions. Like, just to take one last example here is, say I had done a lot of internships, first at a startup, then at a VC firm, and then I had that PhD program where I went to first Morgan Stanley and then AT Kearney. And then I was planning to join Titan Capital later on, but I joined something else. And then I had a lot of these consulting club and the PEADS, which is a startup incubator here. These are all there on my profile. The things one would think about, you have AT Kearney, Morgan Stanley, and all of that. You would want to talk a lot more about them because they are, again, big brands. Something that I learned during the process was they're not as important if they're not, personalized to you. So if in case, so in my essay, especially when I was submitting to Columbia or all of these other schools as well, I literally had to ignore those as something, and they were like a obstacle to my essays. I started off with, how I wanted to help startups, and that's why I did my internship at Titan Capital at the startup and all of that. The way I used Morgan Stanley and AT Kearney was just on the softer skills, the thing that I wanted to learn, like a technical skill and all of that, because they were not matching with my entire story. Where eventually I wanted to still help startups or start a VC fund or be in that ecosystem. So even though they were big brands, they were not matching to the entire story. So you just take up the things that you feel are the most important from that experience, and then craft that story. That's a bit about, the things that I wanted to share. But I think the rest of the things, I think Kopal could also start off by, explaining how her drafting of the resume, how did she go about that, and I think the other aspects of the application. But yeah, that's a bit about what I wanted to share.
Thanks, Viren. So I'm going to mostly cover four things right now, which is profile building, because there's a lot of questions about how do I build my profile. Then the kind of internships that you should do that actually help, more on co-curricular activities, PORs, all that stuff. And then lastly, I would talk about resumes. So first, I'll cover the profile building part. So the MBA, especially the deferred MBA application process, it's a very black box sort of a thing for everyone who applies. We really don't know what it is that they're looking for or what it is that they want. But broadly, if I had to classify what it is that they're looking for, I'd say it's mostly three things. One is some sort of quantitative academic evidence that you do excel in academics. It could be in any form. This could be your GPA, this could be a strong GRE GMAT score, this could be any sort of an academic award you've gotten, any sort of scholarships, anything related to that. So basically evidence that you are good with acads and you can keep up with the rigorous MBA curriculum. B is leadership and your internships, basically whatever extra you've done. So have you had significant leadership positions? What kind of internships have you done? Do they fit into your career story? All these sort of things. And the third is mostly a bracket of soft skills and culture fit, which is basically that all these schools, they focus a lot more on culture and do you fit into their school, because they all have different values, they have different priorities, and if you fit into that, then that's great for them. And then the basic, communication skills. How do you talk? How do you communicate? How you use your body language? All of those things. So when you're thinking of profile building, just cover yourself into these three, just divide your profile into these three buckets and see what it is that you're missing. Do you think you need more academic focus? Then try focusing a lot more on your GRE GMAT score in case your CGPA isn't good. If your GPA is good and you feel like you're lacking on internships, focus more on getting internships. Or if you feel like you don't have enough leadership, focus more on finding avenues where you can lead and you can find stories from that. So that's mostly what works on profile, what you should follow when you're thinking of how do I build my profile. The next thing is resumes. So when you're thinking of resumes, it's as standard as your job application resumes are. It should be one pager, no more than one page. In terms of templates, a lot of schools provide their own resume templates. So in case you're confused what template to use, you can just refer any B school. Most of them have resume templates and resume examples of their students. So you can just use one of those templates and fill in. You'll have to tweak it a bit because those will be resumes of people who've had WorkX. So you will want to include some things from your college, so that you can do, but that'll be a nice template to follow. In terms of tips and guidelines on how to go about resume, it's the standard stuff. You need to quantify everything. Everything needs to be a number, because admission committees really don't have time to go through every single word you've written. They're going to focus on the numbers. If you've gotten some award, mention, ranked one out of 500 plus people, or if you did something cool in your internship, I don't know, maybe increased daily active users by 45%, reduced manual effort by 30%, or increased revenue by 2x, 10x, whatever it is. Numbers are the most important because they are the ones that make the most impact. And also always use action oriented words, you know, completed, increased, performed, conducted, things like that, improved. Always use action oriented words. Never, for example, if you want to say, I was part of a team which increased revenue by 10x, you don't write part of a team that increased revenue by 10x. You write increased revenue by 10x as part of team A. So start with those action oriented words. Another thing which differentiates your job resumes from your MBA resumes is that there's a lot of focus on leadership and volunteering as well. So if there's some sort of impactful volunteering activity you've done, as part of maybe Nirman or Abhigyan in our campuses, or something that you've done at home, something you've done outside of college, and if it's impactful, if it's worth talking about, make sure you include it in your resume because MBA schools do value it. And also your leadership skills. So whatever, if you've had some good leadership skills in clubs and departments, in maybe a sports team, whatever it is, do mention it in your deferred resumes, because B schools care a lot more about your acads than your jobs do. The next thing is your extra and co-curricular activities. I am not really sure what to say in this, to be honest, because it's a very personal thing. Whatever it is you feel you're really good at, and it could be anything, it could be dancing, it could be sports, it could be financial management, people lead all those financial management clubs. Whatever it is that you think you've done in college and it has made impact, you have stories to talk about from it, you've been doing it for some time, and it has given something to you. You've either grown from it, you've learned lessons, you have taken something away from it. Talk about it. B schools really really love to know the person that you are over the stats that you provide. They really really look for people who are a lot more than their resume. So it's really nice for you to talk about things that you're passionate about. Like, I remember Rohan spoke a lot about his cricket, his passion for cricket in one of his essays. And that was actually, when I saw that essay, I threw away all my drafts and I started everything from scratch because it was such a powerful essay. So extracurriculars is just something that, whatever it is you feel like you've been doing for a while. Like for me, I spoke a lot about my time with the LDC, which was the Literary and Debating Club in Goa. I loved that club. I did so many things with that club. I was part of debating competitions, I was part of literary competitions, I worked as a core team member, I organized the parliamentary debate tournament. And because I was so passionate about it, I was able to talk about it at a head drop. Whenever someone would ask me in the interviews, in the essays, I was very very eager to talk about it. I also spoke a lot about my time with Abhigyan, which is similar to Nirman in Goa. And I was part of Abhigyan for about 2 3 years. I was the batch head, and I would go to teach all these kids every day from 5 to 6 p.m. And it was the best time of my day. So I loved doing it, and I spoke heavily about these things. So extracurriculars, I don't think you should plan out your extracurriculars in the sense that this will look good, this will look bad. Whatever it is that you do like to do, if you've been dancing for a while, if you've been playing some sport for a while, if there's a club that you really like Pides, Viren mentioned, whatever it is, it doesn't matter if it's like a big club on campus or not, or if it's like a big POR or whatever it is. Like, there's this hierarchy in campus. This is a big POR, this is small POR. Nobody from the US knows what's a big club in BITS Pilani and what's a small club. As long as it's something that means something to you and you've been able to contribute, you've been able to do some work with it, you've been able to make impact, you've been able to change things, and you have a lot of learnings from it, use it. And don't play it down, use it as a big thing, like portray it as a big thing. Make sure you sell it as something big, because it has been big, it's given you so many learnings. So that's something very important to keep in mind. Don't underplay any of your extracurriculars. The last thing that we have to talk about is internships. So the thing with internships is that when you're applying, you will basically form a story which will talk about everything that you, since your inception of what I want to do in my life, what steps you've taken then to do those things, and how it links to whatever it is that you want to do in life. So if you feel like you're clear about what it is you want to do post MBA, post undergrad, these things, then do the kind of internships that will help. If you feel you're not clear, which was the case with me because I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, so I did every other internship under the sun. I've done a software development internship, I've done a PM internship, I've done a data analyst internship, I've done a data science internship, I've done a research internship. There is no internship that I haven't done because I was just clueless. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was just applying and doing every internship I could find, which was also easier for me because it was a pandemic at that time. So it was much easier to do these remote internships, which might be more difficult now. So but then when I was applying, I didn't use all of them. When I was applying, I had a clearer goal in mind, and so I only cherry picked the internships that were, that helped my goal and that helped further my story, and only use them. So if you're someone like me, you can try doing different things and figure out what it is you want to do, and then cherry pick those instances when you're applying. But if you are much clearer about it, then you should do things that basically further your story. So, for example, if you are somebody who wants to talk about how you want to be an investment banker post MBA, filling your resume with software development internships might not be the best idea, because then there'll be a big question of why software development. If IB is what it is you want to do, why did you add these SD internships? So everything sort of needs to be very interlinked, and it needs to have a reason for it. Like if you're in an interview, they'll have your resume and they'll ask you questions on why this, why this, why this, why did you choose bits, why did you choose this branch, why did you take this internship? So you need to have reasons for all of it, and it's always good when it's linked to your story. The other thing which Viren also mentioned with internships is that it really, really doesn't matter if it's a big brand or a no-name startup. Like that's something that you don't need to think about at all. It doesn't matter if your internship was at Amazon or at a 10 people startup. As long as there's impact, as long as there you're able to talk about it, you have so many stories from it, you've done good work from it, you can mention it in your resume, then that's the best thing you can do for your profile. Like working at Amazon and doing nothing and making reports versus working at a no-name startup and doing crazy things, whatever it is that you were working on. If you're working on a product thing, devising features, working on features, whatever it is, it will hold a lot more value than just name dropping a brand. Because at this stage, when you have no work ex, all they can judge you by is your resume and the kind of work that you've done in your internships, right? Because you don't have work ex. So your internships do hold a lot of value, and the kind of work you've done, the kind of impact you've created means a lot. And then you should also be able to talk about it. So in your interview, if they ask you, you should have something to say about your internships. It shouldn't be a case where you're just like, oh yeah, I just did like a few reports or something. You need to tell them that I was on it the entire time, and I was doing everything I could, and I learned so many things, and I made so much impact. So brand value is something that I really don't think anyone should run after. Just run after experience, wherever you're getting the most exposure, wherever you're getting the most experience, and whatever it is that fits your goals the best. And yeah, I think that covers everything I had, and Rohan will take it forward now.
Perfect. Thanks, Kopal. Hey guys, I think Viren and Kopal have mostly covered all the aspects of the application. So I'll just try to tie everything together and give you a sort of summary on what's the timeline you should be looking at, how the interview process goes, how you can leverage the bit tag, and eventually the post application parts, which is financially, how does an MBA look? And, if not deferred, what other backup options all of you can have? So starting with timelines, so I'll take you guys through the timeline I followed. Again, timelines will be very personal to all of you guys. One major consideration would be whether you're doing your PS2 in Sem 1 or Sem 2, a bunch of these things. I'll touch up on that towards the end. But roughly, I think if you start now, you'll mostly have about 8 to 9 months before the application deadline. April of 2025 will be the deadline if you're applying for the 2025 deferred MBA. And usually every year the deadlines are in April, March to Aprilish. So target to submit by March so that you have some buffer as well, and you don't keep it too close to the deadline. So the first thing I would recommend everyone to do is just start off with basic research about what an MBA is, what you can get out of it, and whether MBA is for you or not. Because a lot of people just suddenly start off with the application process directly, start writing or preparing for GMAT, thinking about essays, speaking to professors for LORs. But if you don't intrinsically want to do an MBA itself, then that will show up in a lot of parts of your application, especially in the interviews and essays. So the admission committees of all these top B schools have gone through millions of applications before, and they can easily sort of smell whether you're actually passionate about doing an MBA or not. So start off with some basic research about what MBA is, what kind of schools offer deferred MBA, and try to make sure that you actually want to do an MBA sometime in the future. You don't need to have it very sorted. Key, I want to do it this year. This is the specific sort of school I want, specific goal I have. Roughly, just figuring out that yes, you want an MBA. That's a good enough start. The next sort of step I would say is giving your GMAT or GRE as early as possible. So I would say finish it by October, November. That will give you about 3 to 4 months now to, for those who haven't started prep, let's say, to start and eventually give the exam by October, November. So that if you are not happy with the score, let's say, that you get on the first time, it gives you a month or two of buffer to sort of prepare and retake the exam. So target to give your first GMAT GRE attempt by October to November. Once you've gotten that out of the way, that's by far the most time-taking process, I would say, preparing and writing GMAT. Even within preparing, Viren mentioned a lot of us as Indian engineers have good sort of background in maths. So usually what I've seen is verbal takes up a lot of time for us, like Indians in general. Now the GMAT sort of focus edition has also come in with data insights, I think. So data insights and quant, I feel, are something which we slightly might have an upper hand compared to global applicants, but where we seriously lack is the verbal aspect. A lot of these other English speaking countries um, have a much stronger edge in English because that's something that's sort of drilled into them right from their schooling days, both speaking, writing English. So verbal for them comes more naturally. So if we want to sort of compete with those sort of verbal scores, I would suggest giving 60 to 70% of the overall GMAT prep time to verbal and the remaining to quant. Again, based on the mock that you take initially, you'll figure out which is your strong hold and which isn't, and then you can spend most time on it. But generally, from what I've seen, verbal usually takes a bit longer. So maybe start your prep with that and target to give your GMAT GRE by October, November. After that, then I think you can spend about a month just narrowing down what schools you want to apply to. Um, I think there are about 10-ish schools, I think, in the US that have deferred MBAs. So I would suggest keep it to five or under, because if you do more than that, then the rest of the application becomes very stretched, especially essay writing. You'll have to write two essays each for 7 8 schools. That becomes about 15 essays, and that's very time consuming. So narrow it down to five-ish schools. One or two plus minus is fine, and have again the usual split that you'll probably find online also is have one or two like reach schools which you feel are probably above your reach. The top, let's say Stanford, Wharton, these kind of schools, you can have one or two. Then one or two schools which you think you have a good shot at, and then one or two schools which is sort of like a safer backup option if in case you don't get any of the first 3 4 schools you apply to. So roughly shortlist it down to 5 to 6 schools, and keep those sort of cemented down so that you can then start working on the specific LORs and essays for each school. Parallelly, and I think by November, December, you should have sort of narrowed down the schools. Also, parallelly, by December, I feel you should also have narrowed down on who your recommender should be. And for that, the work has to probably start now. For example, if you don't have any professor or a professional work ex recommender that you have in mind right now, you should immediately sort of start building those relations with your professors or at your internship workplace. Either do a project with a prof, or start or apply for an internship and sort of get closer to your manager or anyone who can recommend you. So start building those relations from now itself, so that by the time the year end approaches, you can reach out to them and ask if they'd be comfortable to write you an LOR. So now most schools require two LORs. I think Colombia, as Viren mentioned, required only one. So have 2 to 3 sort of recommenders in your mind, and if you're applying to multiple schools, you can sort of mix and match based on what the school wants. Some schools probably prefer professional LORs, some schools prefer academic LORs. So you can then mix and match based on what the school wants. And also, you ideally shouldn't burden each recommender with like 8 9 sort of recommendation letters. So it's always good to have 3 to 4 options, and then split all the LORs amongst them. Once you're done with the LORs, the next sort of most time consuming part is the essays. For me, essays took about 2 months to write. I applied to 5 schools. So there was about 9 to, I think, 10-ish essays that I had to write. Roughly, the essays are divided into two kinds of essays. One is more about your long term goals, your life story, more about you. And the other essay is more about why you want to do an MBA and why the specific school you're applying to. So start making rough stories for both of these essays, and then you can use these basic templates for all the schools you're applying to. Of course, you'll have to do sort of minor detailing and customize it or personalize it to the specific school you're applying to. But start working on the basic templates or storylines for both of these types of essays and have that ready. And then you can start personalizing it to each school. So this essay part, I'd say start by Jan, maximum by Jan mid. That'll give you about 1.5 to 2 months of time to properly get your essays sorted. This time, you'll also have to do a much deeper research about each school. Go deeper into what specific courses interest you, which professors you want to work with, what different clubs exist in each of these colleges, because all of those you'll have to mention in the LORs to sort of give the adcom an impression that you're really passionate about the specific school you're applying to. So that's why this process takes time, and each essay, for me at least, went through 7 8 iterations. So by the time you do all of that, easily it'll take up about 6 to 8 weeks. So start by Jan. Um, the last sort of step I would say is consolidating your resume. The reason I've mentioned it right at the end is because while you're doing all of these other things, parallelly you would be interning or doing a bunch of other stuff which you can add to the resume. So it's always sort of good to keep that towards the end so that you don't miss out on anything in the resume. So by March, you should have your essays and resume both sorted, and that will give you a couple of weeks sort of buffer before the actual deadlines come. One major mistake I made was I got too close to the deadlines. I think it was for Columbia or Booth, one of them. I submitted my application 2 to 3 hours before the deadline, and trust me, you do not want to be in that position. It was extremely stressful, and somehow I submitted on time, but have at least a week sort of buffer before the deadline to submit. So roughly, this is the timeline I would suggest, 8 to 9 months starting from now. Coming to cool, let's say all of this goes well, you submit your application and you hear back and you have an interview. So the process usually for most schools is you'll have one interview after you're shortlisted, your application gets shortlisted, except for Wharton. I'll come to Wharton in a bit. And these interviews are usually taken by either AdCom members or um, second year MBA students, or sometimes even the alumni of the specific school. And there's no sort of pro or con to each of them, very dependent on the interviewer and how you sort of prepare for the interview. So doesn't matter who is your interviewer, but usually most schools will tell you who your interviewer is a couple of days before the interview. So one thing you all must do is research the interviewer properly beforehand on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever sort of online material you can find on the interviewer, read up, because sometimes there will be specific common elements between you and the interviewer that you would want to bring out during the interview, so that they remember you and you sort of bond a little bit better during the interview. For example, for me, I think in one of my interviews I was just going through his LinkedIn profile, and he had a bunch of things posted about F1. So during the interview, when I was introducing myself, I sort of mentioned F1, even though I wasn't the biggest F1 fan. I just mentioned it so that we could connect, and ended up speaking like one or two sort of conversations regarding F1 itself. So that sort of makes you also more comfortable during the interview and leaves a good impression on the interview as well. Coming to what kind of questions get asked in the interview, very similar to the essays. I feel you will get asked things like what are your short term goals, long term goals, why do you want to join this specific college, how will you contribute to this college. And another segment of questions is behavioral questions, which is very situational. For example, a question I got asked during my booth interview was, tell me about a situation where you asked for help. This was something very random, like I hadn't prepared for this at all. So I just had to come up with something on spot. So for questions like these, it's always again good to sort of have a strong story in mind about what your profile overall looks like. For example, for me, the profile I had built for my deferred MBA applications was purely based on my finance sort of background that I had. Bunch of finance internships. I was interning at JP Morgan at the point. I'd done a summer school at LSE. So even my short-term, long-term goals were related to starting my own venture debt fund eventually, and mostly staying in touch with finance. And venture debt was because in JP Morgan I was working with the debt credit ratings team. So when I was asked that question about how I asked for help, my answer was again doubling down on my finance experience that I had. So what I mentioned was, when I joined JP Morgan, it was the first sort of corporate internship I was doing. Most of the other internships I'd done were either very small projects with a specific person in the company, or at early stage startups. So what took the most time for me was to understand how the corporate sort of environment worked. So my answer was revolving around how I asked my manager for help on getting to know how corporate culture works, how the internal tools work, timelines, emailing, all of those sort of etiquettes. So keep it sort of related to the overall story that you're painting, because the interviewers usually won't have access to your profile when they interview you. They'll only have your resume. So when they submit a report of what you say in the interview, and it very closely matches what you've mentioned in your essays, LORs, and all of the other parts of the application, it again ties together really well and increases your chances of getting through. If you speak about something completely different during your interviews and you mention completely different things in your essays, then sort of the adcom might wonder where your actual interest lies. Are you even sure what you want to do in the long run? So that's the only reason to understand your story very well and have specific anecdotes to talk about. Um, Again, for interview prep, I'd say immediately after you submit all your applications by April, you should start preparing for interviews. And the best way is to do mock interviews, be it with folks from the school itself. So I reached out on LinkedIn to a bunch of people from Booth in Colombia, and I got them to interview me once or twice. Second option is, of course, us, Viren, Kopal, me, whoever else have gotten through bits, you can reach out to us and we'll love to help you out with the interview prep also. So keep about a month or two for this, April, May, and then in May, usually you'll have your interviews. And sort of doubling down on what Kopal said, don't underplay anything, like any small thing, even be it organizing, let's say, one sort of game during Quark, or starting a club, anything from there to maybe starting a club by yourself. All of them can be sort of sold to the adcom as something very glorified if you can speak confidently about it and sell it well. So don't worry too much that, okay, I haven't done something extravagant during college or anything. During the interview also, even if it's the smallest sort of incident, if you can sell it in the right way, portray it as if you've actually learned a lot from that incident, you've created a lot of impact, that'll go a long way. So during your interview practice, practice these as well, like selling and staying confident. These two will come in very handy in the interview and also during the essays when you're writing. So overall, now coming to the bits tag that we have, right? I think the biggest sort of advantage we have as Bitsians is the fact that BITS is a recognized institute globally, and also the fact that there have been people from BITS who've gotten deferred admits before. That makes a big difference because when adcoms receive applications, seeing a familiar name from your profile to something or someone who they've previously admitted before makes a very good sort of first impression. The IITs and BITS have built that tag over the last couple of years because most of the people who get deferred admits are from tier one colleges. So all of you have that sort of edge over anyone else who's applying from India or even tier two, tier three colleges throughout the globe. So adcoms also understand the trade-off between CGPA and college. For example, an 8 CG from BITS, they'll know is a lot more worthy than, let's say, a 9 CGPA from a tier 2 tier 3 colleges, tier 2 tier 3 college, because they know the academic rigor and the difficulty level BITS is at compared to all the other colleges. So it's not a blind sort of CGPA comparison they do. The college also plays a big role, and we all have that advantage. The second biggest advantage of the bits tag is during preparation. You can reach out to a lot of sort of alumni who have deferred admits like us, and also those who have done MBAs in the colleges before. Like there are thousands of Bitsians you'll find who have done MBAs from Stanford, Columbia, Wharton, and just reaching out to them, being a Bitsian, you have a much higher rate of getting a response, and they'll eventually, guide you, take mock interviews, and help you out in multiple different ways. So leverage that bit tag you have, network with as many people as possible, look up people who have done MBAs from bits before, and sort of just send connection requests, be in their circles now, and then when the time comes, you can obviously reach out to them. Cool. Now, let's say all this is done. You've, let's say, gotten an admit, and now the next sort of consideration you have is the financial aspects of it. So, usually, an MBA in one of these top seven B schools will cost you about 200 to $250,000, including tuition, your staying expenses, food, miscellaneous costs, and all of that. That comes out to about 2-ish crores, which is quite a lot of money for most of us. But luckily, there are a lot of sort of scholarships that we can avail. Similar to BITS, most of these B schools have merit and need scholarships both. The most of the merit scholarships you will automatically be qualified for. So you don't even have to fill up any application form based on whatever application you've submitted for the deferred MBA itself. You'll qualify for the getting screened for the scholarships, and then if they find your profile really good, then you will end up getting merit scholarship as well. That part is a little, again, black box, that the financial aid committee doesn't mention a lot of details about what specifically they look at before giving you a scholarship. But it's usually a combination of all of these things: your GMAT, GRE scores, your resume, your goals, all of these things. And if they, find your profile fit, you will get a merit scholarship. And usually the scholarship application process happens in the year you choose to go for the MBA. So if you get a deferred admit, you have to work minimum 2 years and a maximum of 5 years before you actually can go to do the MBA. So let's say you apply this year and get an admit, let's say in 2025, and you choose to go for the MBA in 2029. So you will be applying for scholarships in 2029. So until then, you won't know whether you will get a scholarship or not. So that is something that will come up a much later. So it's always good to sort of create a backup option in case you don't get the scholarship. And for backup options, the schools help you avail student loans. Some schools have tie up with specific banks as well, and some schools also have need-based scholarship applications. This is something you will have to specifically apply for again in the year in which you go. And there are these third-party sort of private players that provide loans at lower interest rates to applicants. Um, for example, I think Reliance has a tie-up with Stanford. So anyone who has a Stanford sort of MBA can apply for a Reliance scholarship, and they will sort of take care of your tuition. Again, that this is a scholarship, sorry, not sort of loan. But similar to such tie-ups, there are other third-party loan providers that help you with loans at lower interest costs. So I personally haven't researched as much yet, but I've heard of bunch of them, so they do exist. And finally, if you can self-fund it, then well and good. But most of us probably won't be in that situation. So it's good to sort of research on these parts and have it in mind. But obviously, after you've gotten the admit, no point thinking too much about it now, because it's only going to take up a lot of time and the application outcome is not certain yet. So again, no point thinking about it. Let's assume now the worst case outcome. Let's say you've put in all the effort, given interviews, and you did not get a deferred admit. Now, what do you do? Two to three options that you have. One is, of course, if you're sort of narrowed down on B schools in the US, for example, you can always apply in the usual application cycles. Every year, all of the schools roll out application forms, and you can apply with 3 to 4 years of work ex usually. That's something you can do. And usually in a class of MBA students in one of these top schools, 80% or even more than that come from these direct application routes, and only 10% or sometimes even lesser come through deferred MBAs. So even if you apply sort of later on, you have a good chance of getting in. So if you don't get a deferred MBA admit now, it's okay. Like, there's no reason to beat yourself up about it at all. The next option you have is to maybe do an MBA in India itself. You can write CAT, apply to the IIMs, or even ISB for that matter. For ISB, you don't need CAT. It's again GRE, GMAT only. And if you've already gotten that out of the way and you have a good score, you already have a head start to apply to ISB later on. Let's say you don't want either of these, you want to do a master's program immediately. Of late, there are programs like MIM, MEM, masters in management, masters in engineering management. So these sort of programs you can apply to. They are similar to MBA in some sense, but they're more theoretical and less of sort of practical. So that's the only difference. But again, you can research about it and take a call. So yeah, I think broadly these are the few backup options you can have. Of course, you can directly get into the work field, see what you're liking, figure out what you like, and then once you know what you want to do, then sort of reconsider whether you actually want an MBA or not. Because a lot of people, once they start working, figure out that they probably don't need an MBA at all. So If that's you, then I mean, well and good. You don't have to sort of spend 2 crores. But yeah, I think overall, we've covered most of the aspects we wanted to amongst the three of us. If you all, I think we have a bunch of questions. So, Shubham, how do you want to do the Q&A bit?
Uh, Most of the questions that have been asked in the chat, I think Viren and Kopal have answered that. I have a few questions that I got from in the form responses, so I'll quickly ask those. And if it's covered, then you can like slightly touch upon it. Uh, so there is one question that how did you get internships from big firms, excluding PS1, PS2, or SIP? What skills did you acquire to get these internships?
I think Kopal should take this.
Sorry, could you please go again? I couldn't hear anything.
Yeah, sure. The question is, how did you get internships from big firms, excluding PS1, PS2, or SIP? SIP, I guess it's summer internship program. What skills did you acquire to get these internships?
I got all of my internships except for PS2 through LinkedIn. Like I am 24/7 on LinkedIn even now. I just can't seem to let go of my LinkedIn addiction. So I'm just on LinkedIn and I get all these posts because I follow them so much. So ever since my first year, I've been getting every single post whenever anyone is hiring, and I just texted them. I would cold email. I also cold emailed a lot of startup founders when I was looking for internships. Cold texted them on LinkedIn. Lots of Bitsian founders, and they're usually really nice. Especially Bitsian founders will usually reply to you and will get back. And if they can't help you, they'll at least give you feedback or just it's a good connection to have. So I would cold text a lot of people on LinkedIn. I would apply through LinkedIn forms, and that's mostly what I've done. Yeah.
Yeah, very similar for me as well. Most of my internships also came through networking. One sort of interesting incident was there was when we were in second year, I think there was a alumni meet that happened in the Goa campus. So during that meet, I was just walking around the BDOM area in college, and I met the CEO of IDFC Bank, and he eventually switched to Care Ratings, and he was leading he was the CEO of Care Ratings. So because I'd already spoken to him once, he remembered me when I messaged him on LinkedIn, and I ended up getting an internship through him. So just pure networking, I guess. Just either stay active on LinkedIn or any sort of networking event, alumni event happens in campus or anywhere. Just be present, be around, try to make connections. Most of the internships probably come through these.
Viren, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think they covered most of it. I think just to summarize, I think it's just serendipity and taking all the shots that you have. If you keep taking enough shots, I think something just might eventually happen.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. There is one question which asks, do core branches like CSC electronics get a higher weightage than chemical?
I think I'll be able to cover this much better. So for reference, I have a master's in mathematics plus bachelor's in chemical. I think that played no role in terms of selecting anyone. I think again, as we mentioned, as it was the case with POR, there is no big small POR. It's the same case with not one degree is better than the other. It's just when you're comparing maybe different universities, it might come into play. As you mentioned, what are the rankings, or not just ranking, but what their reputation is. They've gotten people from that college or not. And then similarly, maybe if it's a commerce college, how much competitive that is, how many people are applying, and all of that. But degree wise, I think I wouldn't worry too much if you are on any degree that you feel that you don't like, or that is a core degree or anything of that matter.
Okay, a similar question to that. They asked that does a finance minor actually help?
Yes, if you're sort of building a story or profile in the finance sort of side, if that's your long-term goal you're writing about, then it definitely helps because it shows the outcome that you're actually interested in finance and you're taking active steps to get better in that domain. So if that's the case, then yes, 100% it helps. But is it a requirement? No. A lot of people, if they have a finance goal but don't have a finance minor, they still sort of get in. So it's not a need that you need to have, but it's of course a good to have, to indicate sort of interest. But if your goal is something completely different, then I don't think a finance minor will play a big role. But yeah.
I
To
think
add
that's very
to that, I
important.
think,
Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
Kopal can just go on.
I think that's very important what Rohan said, because I feel like there is this assumption on at least the Goa campus that, finance minor will help in MBAs. It really makes no sense, because as long as your goal is not completely like finance focused and you're not doing everything finance related, there nobody will care. It really needs to be very focused on whatever your story is. If you're saying I want to do product management, it's not gonna really serve your story. You're better off doing a PM internship, or doing PM case competitions or something like that. So, and this goes for the previous question as well. A lot of people who are chemical engineers, they have applied with the goal of going into the clean tech industry. And their chemical engineering has served them so much because of it, because they have the core knowledge, they have the you know they know the frameworks about it. So it really focus more on your story than on what will help you, like what will be a broad help. Like it's very
Yeah.
personal to what it is you want to do.
I think to the chemical point, I'd also like to mention, I think a lot of people, honestly, who are from core degrees are the ones who apply to all of these MBA programs because they're like the ones who feel like we need to do more and all of that. You can go on LinkedIn, search for people from bits as well. I think a lot of from chemical engineer, mechanical engineer who have served their purpose in terms of they've been working at core companies, maybe Shell, Schlumberger, all of that. And then they are the ones who get into, I think recently someone from Shell got into Harvard MBA, and then Schlumberger again is a big company that people get into. So I think you shouldn't be disheartened for that. And I think secondly, I wanted to cover the other aspect of the finance minor as well. I think definitely, firstly, know what you're getting into. I think it's still, I still realize that a lot of people chase it, but few people realize that it's not an easy thing. That a lot of people also end up ruining their grades just because on the chase of it, but it's not an easy thing. Firstly is that, and I think secondly, wanted to cover the aspect where if you are interested in finance and if you don't have that finance minor, you can just take up courses, and if you're not able to get them on campus, even off campus, just the intent of doing just standalone courses can also still help. For reference, as a dual degree student, I didn't have the option to complete the finance minor. You don't get I didn't get the degree of sorts. I did do the summer school where I did the finance courses. And even though I didn't have the degree, I could still mention that I had done those courses because of the interest and because it was aligning with my profile of building something into venture and again, VC startups, all of that. It might have helped, it might have not, we don't know. But I'm saying just doing stuff that you want to do because of purely interest, I think that is, if you're doing that, then I think eventually things would work out rather than you know crafting it according to what is you know helpful for placements or anything else that you feel that doesn't align to you.
Uh, Rohan, would you like to add something, or should I move to
No,
next
no,
question?
that's we can move on.
Oh. There is one last question in the forms, and it asks that what is the single most important thing in a resume that increases your chance of getting selected? Just trying to find like the single most important thing. I don't.
There is no single most important thing. Like the entire application itself, there are 5 to 6 different components, and as long as you're doing really good in at least two of them and okayish in the rest, you'll get through. Very similar to the resume also. In the resume, you have about 5 to 6 sections. Your GPA, your internships, your extracurricular activities, many leadership roles that you've had. So out of all of these, again, if you've demonstrate quality in at least two of them, let's say you have a good GPA and you have multiple PORs, or you've done 2 to 3 internships and have really good extracurriculars, that's good enough. Any sort of permutation combination of those 4 to 5 elements, if you're good at one or two of them and decent at the rest, you're good to go. There's no sort of single element that they look at.
Yeah, and I think as Kopal had mentioned, you can still optimize your resume though, in terms of, providing impact numbers and all of that. I remember doing something very specific, which was again risky, but I think I just had some heard from someone that it might work or not. So I in the resume also, as I was applying to different schools, I had just color coded the heading into the school's color. Like for Columbia, I just had color coded the heading as a blue one. It is a very risky move. I don't know. I know now for a fact that it doesn't get you disqualified, but I also want to flag that if 30 or whatever 30, 32 people, all of you do that, that will just lose that purpose. I just want to mention, do something you can do, still optimize things in your resume, but something that is unique, or anything that you want to do, but still keep the format in terms of what is the like ideal format for the resume, but you can still optimize.
Yeah. And I'd say run it by people, run it by people that you think can give you more feedback. Run it by any of us, any alumni, and just get as much feedback as you can on your resumes.
There are some unanswered questions in the chat, so I'll quickly go through them. There is one question, it's asked by Ishan, that would it be possible for the team to share the essays, the panelists, during like the essays that you submitted during our applications? Is it allowed or is it possible?
Usually it's not sort of allowed or advised to, let's say, share it publicly. But if anyone's really interested, then they can reach out to us personally, and we'd love to sort of take them through our essays. But sharing publicly, I don't think is very ethical from an AdCom point of view, also. But do reach out to us personally. Would love to sort of share them and take you guys through the essays also.
You just want to add again though, but take the first step on your through yourself, because once you see that essay, you will be drawn to making your essay similar to that, and that might not work eventually. Just take that first shot, and then maybe if you're still struggling, maybe reach out. But yeah.
There is one question by Medha. She asks that a lot of deferred application sites talk about a plan for the 2 to 4 years before you start your MBA program. How do we highlight this in our application, and how important is this?
So the question is about the next 2 to 4 years. Let me just read it.
Before you start your MBA,
Yeah.
after you graduate, and before you
Basically
start
before
your
your
deferred
MBA,
MBA.
deferral period.
Okay. So that's something that is quite important actually, because what they really look for is a lot of clarity from you in terms of what you want. So they do want a clear answer that you've structured the next 5, 6 years for you properly. You know what you're going to do undergrad, you know how that is going to help you in your MBA, and you know how that will help you in whatever it is that you're planning to do post MBA. So while it's not set in stone, nobody will come back at you 4 years later and be like, you didn't say what you said you did. It's important to still have clarity and show that clarity in your essays and in your interview. So ideally, as we said, you should have a story in mind on how everything you've done in college, how it links to what you're planning to do in the future, and how it links to what you're planning to do post MBA. Have that story, stick by that story. It's completely okay if it changes, it's absolutely fine, but it's very important to have that clarity, I'd say.
Oh, all right. So I can see one other question, that can you guys share what made you decide to do an MBA? Like, what made you decide that MBA is the call for you?
I think, firstly, I think as it's a deferred MBA thing, I think my primary purpose was just that it gives me a safety net. Even I don't know whether I want to do that MBA, but at least if I've gotten in, if things go south during the deferral period, I can still go there. They'll not tell me no. That is, I think, my primary purpose. Honestly, I did not know whether I want to do an MBA, but I think there's a general reputation of the MBA that it teaches you leadership, teaches you maybe business, all of that. I think eventually I thought that it would eventually help me. And also, I wanted to just honestly just be at a different location, travel internationally, expand my network to more and more people. I think that was my primary purpose, not that I was very interested into business and all of that. But I think specifically for deferred MBA, it is a safety net. There's no, as such, I think, harm when you're if you get in. It's honestly only on the upside.
Yeah, very similar to what Viren mentioned towards the end. It was sort of a dumb way to think about it, but I'd spent 1 month at LSE doing a summer school, and I loved that 1 month. Just because it was in London, I got to meet so many people from different countries, from different age groups. So I just loved that overall experience of living in a country by yourself, meeting new people, a new sort of educational system. So that was why I wanted to sort of get a longer shot at that. So that's why I wanted to do an MBA abroad. So that's how sort of the seed was sown of why I wanted to do why I wanted to do the MBA. But eventually, because my career goals were in finance, usually a lot of finance roles require an MBA if you want to move up the ladder. So that sort of became an add-on benefit later on. But yeah, these were the two main reasons.
For me, it was simply I really did not like engineering, so I wanted a way out. And I figured I had a knack for, management of business things in general. I loved leading teams. I loved anything related to strategy. So I felt like that was something where I wanted to be. And when I did my research and saw people who were where I wanted to be, I saw most of them had an MBA. So that's just how it fit in for me.
Uh, I would like to say that if anyone in the audience wants to ask questions, you can feel
I
free to
think there's a
unmute
few
your mic.
questions we missed on the chat.
Okay.
On the top,
So I think most are. There was one question where they were asking that how helpful is a CFA level one? I think that question is directed towards Rohan.
yeah.
So
I think Rohan has answered it in chat, no?
Yeah, I mentioned in chat. Similar to finance minor, again, not required, but if you have a finance sort of goal, it definitely helps.
There's a question about difference between normal MBA and deferred MBA. We
yeah,
haven't
two
covered.
people have asked that.
Yeah.
So
There's no difference as such. It's you become part of the same program through a deferred MBA as you do through the full time after 4 or 5 years of WorkX. The only difference as such is you get in a lot before the normal route. You get in straight out of undergrad without WorkX. You get access to that big network a lot sooner. You get access to the school's resources a lot sooner, and you have this big fat safety net to experiment for the next 3-4 years. And if anyone wants to add.
No, I think
someone is
that's
asking that. Okay, would you like to add something, Rohan?
no, nothing.
Someone is asking that how much do certifications from Udemy or Coursera help in your application or resume?
Mm, the certifications themselves, I would say, don't add too much value, but again, if it's in the field you're building a story around, it definitely shows interest and the fact that you're taking action towards something you want. So in that way it does help, but purely the certificate itself I don't think sort of adds a lot of value.
There's another question about timelines of when you should give GRE or GMAT when doing PS2 as a dual degree, which I think Viren and I can help with. So
Yeah.
I basically gave my GRE in Jan of 2023, which was when there was a break between the two PS. So that is the time that I took to prepare and give my GRE.
That was the same for me. But yeah. think that works for most people.
I think another question that I forgot to cover was for single degree students taking PS2 in Sem 1 or Sem 2. That was something even I was breaking my head about a lot during college. And both of them have their pros and cons. So if you do take your PS2 in Sem 1, by the time you apply, you would have had 6 months of an internship to show for on your resume. You probably have a good connect within the workplace to give you an LOR. So those are two pretty big pros. And coming to the other side, if you do your PS2 in Sem 2, it gives you sort of time to give GMAT a lot earlier. You can study and give it in your Sem 1, so that if you're not happy with the score, you can retake it. And that's the biggest sort of advantage of doing it in Sem 1, sorry, Sem 2. So again, depending on what your sort of strengths are, for example, if your LORs are already sorted through other internships or with a professor, then you don't really have to do a PS2 in Sem 1. You'd rather spend that time focusing on GMAT. But if you really, really need that one LOR from an internship workplace, then take it up in Sem 1 so that you have that ready by the time you apply.
There is one question uh, from Ishan. He asked that I want to get into consulting post MBA. I have experience with 3 live projects through 180 DC, and I'm the current POR holder of the same as well. I'm guessing that's a good indicator of interest in the same. So is it, and also any other active steps I can take to strengthen convincing with regards to the same?
I think
Again,
that's a good
Viren,
step.
you
I
can.
think. Yeah, I think that's a good step in showing intent for the field. I think that'll definitely go a long way. But I think generally, apart from that, you could just show that you have general interest in just business. And I think maybe working not just in the consulting field as a club member and all of that. If you're able to, firstly, like maybe consult outside of that as an internship, internships would definitely help if you have like a consulting internship. If not, maybe general MBA, sorry, business internships would also work. As consulting, as it's a generalist role, there's no specific skill set that you require even post MBA. Your pre MBA can still be very, fungible in terms of you can do anything and still show your interest for consulting. The club would help. Any internships in consulting would be any additional benefit to that.
I'd say case competitions also, right? There's
Yeah,
so many
sorry. Yeah, there's that.
competitions.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh, there is one question that I'm currently in my 3rd year. What should I actually try to work on before I start applying a year later? What should be the primary focus? I guess he's asking.
I mean, I
I
think
think
we've given some broad heuristics about, what you should focus on. Whatever I feel the general answer is to whatever you feel you're lacking in that, I think that is the best way to go forward. I think Rohan was mentioning something.
no, yeah, similar to what you said, like all the elements that we went through. First, again, just research about MBA, which schools you want. If you really want to do the MBA, that should be the first step. But if you're already past that and you want to start building a profile early, then definitely whatever you feel is sort of lacking. If you haven't done enough internships, apply for internships. If you haven't done any project with a prof, do that because that helps you with an LOR. If you feel like your CG is not good, it's okay to not do anything else and just focus on your CG because that does play a big part. And if you want, if you have all of these sorted, then maybe you can start preparing for GMAT earlier also. It never hurts to get done with that sooner. But yeah, any of these based on your personal situation.
Mm, okay. Would you like to add anything, Kopal and Viren? That
No, I think we
No, no, I
covered that.
think that's all. Yeah.
there is one question that I would like to know your opinion on MIM versus a deferred MBA.
Hmm.
Mm, So, I haven't done a lot of research on MIM to be honest, but from what I've heard through my friends and a bit of reading, is that MIM is more sort of theoretical in nature, doesn't have as much focus on, let's say, hands-on work X or networking and things like that. It is an alternative to an MBA, sure, but I don't think it sort of gives you the same amount of exposure that an MBA would. So personally, I would suggest keeping MIM as sort of a backup in case deferred MBA doesn't work out. But again, I'm not probably the best person to answer this. Haven't done my
I
research
think
into
I'll
that.
add a bit. I think it depends a lot on your priorities also. Some people want to come back to India or want to go outside just directly. I know a lot of people who weren't able to secure good placement just because of unfortunate reasons or just anything. I think the current market is also not that great. So I think that just becomes one of the reasons where you're not happy in your job. You want to just directly go and pursue that. I think that is one of the reasons why a lot of people do pursue that. And I think people have had good outcomes out of that as well. Just be aware that as it's a degree that you do just after your undergrad, you would be placed in a business analyst position only, or like just like a fresher or just one level above that, not at a managerial position. But I think it's still a good option for people who want to just directly go outside. It has had great placements, I think, for most of these schools.
There is one question that basically boils down. Someone is asking that having a 3-year experience with one single company or a 3-year experience with 3 different companies. So do the adcoms view both persons differently, or like what's the scene in case of impact given or anything?
Again, doesn't matter as much if you have worked at 1 or 3 places. What would be a red flag is if you've worked at like 6, 7 places and you're switching every few months. That is something that they don't look at very positively. But as long as you're not doing that, what matters more is the sort of impact you've had in each workplace. That matters a lot more than how many places you've worked at. So if in the 3 years you're able to sort of get promoted, show a lot more leadership qualities, work on more impactful projects, then sure, that helps out. But if you worked at, let's say, 3 different smaller startups, let's say, where even within the first year you've had a lot of impact, then that is equally good enough. So there's no sort of right or wrong when it comes to this.
There is one question that what is your opinion on doing an MBA just after college through IIMs compared to a deferred one?
I think very personal, again, depends on what you want to do. Both have different pros and cons. If you want to go outside, just general normal MBA outside would be helpful. IIMs have a different, pros to that. A lot of people still want to stay in India. A lot of people have had great outcomes, and that is also one of the thing a lot of people miss, how Indian MBAs and staying in India, you're only expanding on your network again, and it's only exponentially growing. When you're choosing a different location, you have to start from scratch everything. So there are multiple things to that, but I think it's very personal to a person.
All right. Best resource for GMAT or GRE prep? By the way,
Creators official resources.
there will be a resources drive that will be shared as part of this initiative with everyone who has registered and with all students. So it will have all these important roadmaps or resources that you would want to see there. So that's it. Mm, there are no more questions that I can see. If someone wants to ask some questions, they can unmute and ask right now. Or
Am I audible?
there is one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of have an interest quite similar to Rohan there, in that I want to pursue finance as like a career option post my dual degree, MSc Maths. Yeah. Would you recommend giving CFA level 2 and further, of course, getting the full CFA certification while sort of also applying for Deferred MBA and the like?
I probably wouldn't recommend it because CFA level 2 takes a lot more time to prepare for than level 1. If you have done a finance minor, if you have done a few courses online related to the fundamentals of finance, you can clear level 1 with a couple of months prep, but level 2 will take a lot longer than that. So I don't think it's worth the sort of effort you will put into it, especially because you'll have your internship going on in both SEMs and you'll find it slightly harder to find time for it. I'd say a better use of time would be things like GMAT prep, making sure CG is all right, all of the other things we spoke about. Only and only if you have a lot of time on your hand, then maybe you can give it a shot. But I don't think the ROI is sort of worth it. It doesn't add as much extra value compared to a CFA level 1.
Hello,
Thank you.
I have a question. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so like when you were messaging people on LinkedIn about getting an internship, uh, or getting into contact with someone at an event or something, did you already have the skills required to do the particular internship, or did you mostly learn it through the process of doing the internship?
Um, the skills were mostly learned on the process, like on the job itself, but you need to have a few things that sort of show interest again. Like for example, the care ratings internship I did, the email or the message I sent to the CEO was more related to how I knew the technical side of things. I'd done a few small projects using Python, so related to finance. So then eventually, the sort of opportunity I got was basically using Python to build a sort of model to find outliers in credit ratings. So I didn't know sort of Python really well before that. All the things I used to build that model, I learned on the job itself. But the fact that I just done one or two very basic, simple projects in Python related to finance sort of showed them that I'm interested in it and can sort of learn quickly and take it up. So again, just showing interest is what you need prior. The actual technical skills or hard skills you can learn on the job or later on as well.
And what was the time when you were mostly doing these internships, like second year, third year, whatever?
Third year. So again, like Kopal mentioned, because it was COVID, we had a lot of sort of free time to do internships parallel to our CADs. So that kind of was a blessing in disguise for us. So that helped out. But if you were in college, you still can do remote internships. But for us at that point, because both companies were looking for remote folks and we had the flexibility of time, both sort of played hand in hand. But now it might be slightly tougher. But again, a lot of companies do take interns remotely still. So I would say second year summer or post that would be sort of a good time to do your internships. And just make sure that other aspects of your application don't get affected. Like let's say your CG, or if you had to do a SOP with the prof and you choose an internship instead, it's good, but try to sort of make sure you are handling everything to the best. You shouldn't ideally have to compromise on a lot of things to just fit in something extra. Kopal, you
Thank,
want
thank
to
you.
add anything to this?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Yeah.
I think we are well past time, so we can take one last question. So, if
Hello,
anyone wants to unmute and
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, hi. I just wanted to know, does like a background in consulting or product management or doing like live projects and those, does that in any way help if you want to get into an investment banking role in the future? Like any sort of skills that, would work there as well or something of that sort?
I think consulting definitely helps. Not sure how much product management will help, but consulting and IB do have, I think, some sort of overlap when it comes to the placement processes and all. And both of these industries are driven by like the top 3 or 4 names, which are very glamorous and sort of looked up to. For example, if you have done something with McKinsey or things like that, you probably have a higher chance of getting a good IB role, because there also the sort of things recruiters look for are similar. They also look for sort of big brand names and things like that. But coming to core skills, consulting I feel is a very sort of generic role that helps you get into a lot of other industries. For example, even for me, my entry into product management was because I'd done a lot of consulting sort of work in college and also during placement prep. That sort of helped me a lot with product management, because it teaches you basics of structuring your thought process, problem solving, very generic, important sort of skill sets. So if you're doing that, then that'll help you get into anything else in life in general. So from that aspect, consulting is really good. But the technical side, I don't think there's as much of an overlap between PM and IB.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Hello, may I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for the session. Very inspiring profiles also. So I had got into the world of deferred MBAs through my seniors. I was in the placement unit. I'm still in. So the senior placement team was applying. So they had very stellar profiles. They had a CGPA around 8.5, and they had a co-founding startup as well, which had gotten funding, etc. Still, I don't think much of their applications translated to interview calls. So one is I'm looking at probably where they could have gone wrong, if you could suggest some pointers. Second, would consultants probably like Stacy Blackman or any independent consultants help while applying to these particular colleges? Like one insight I got is different colleges look for very different personas. MIT Sloan, for a example, looks for something like that. Kellogg's has a different requirement. So how to go about this? How would you suggest in your experience?
I
I
think
think, I
that's
mean, for the first, I think, Kopal, go ahead, please.
no, please go ahead.
I was just saying that for the first, again, as we don't have, like, anyway, it's a black box. No one knows what works or not. I cannot confidently say what exactly worked with me. It's a combination of things. So for the person that you're talking about, as you mentioned earlier, stats is one thing, and then the story is another thing. Maybe the story didn't work, maybe. And second thing to also consider is that you would be compared to the people who are applying in your similar profile. Say if you're an engineer, if there are a lot of engineers who have similar stuff on their profile and they have maybe something else better, then that puts you at a disadvantage. So there are multiple factors we can't pinpoint, again, because firstly, right now we don't even know the person. Second is, even if we knew, we couldn't exactly pinpoint what didn't work. But it's just another thing to think about, that it's not just about the stats, it's a lot more about the story than all of that. So I think that's broadly to keep in mind. Secondly, consultants, again, I think Kopal and I can answer. Probably we were using an admissions consultant. His name was Sumit. You can share more info on that as well. Admission consultants can always help. Plus, I think if you feel you need advice on that, so you do refer to some of these consultants. Stacy Blackman, all of that, I just mentioned that if you're using an overseas consultant, just keep in mind the cost that would be associated with that as well. And if they know the Indian applicant pool, how well are they able to understand who you are? So those are some of the things, and anything else, if Kopal, Rohan, you want to add to the third question as well. But
Yeah, I think like especially this year, I saw a lot of people who were applying with crazy stats who didn't get in because, they didn't really focus so much on their story and why they wanted to do an MBA. And they also didn't focus much on their GRE GMAT because they thought that, hey, I'm like this girl, she was the co-founder of a startup, but she had a low GRE score, but she still was, pretty confident. I feel like there are certain things that you need to be very clear on. Like, you need to have a good score, you need to have good internships, like a good profile, a good CV, all of those things. And um getting even slightly overconfident, especially with deferred, is not the way to go, because nobody can tell you how to go about it. So you need to maximize your chances however you can. So that's somewhere that I've specifically seen people go wrong this year. So it could be something like that, although we don't know. For consultants, I would also say that a lot of people just go to these consultants who are much more renowned for their full-time applications and who don't have experience with deferred, because deferred is a different ball game altogether. People who have lots of experience working with people who have 4-5 years of work ex might not be able to do the best for you, simply because they don't know how the deferred application process works, what they're looking for in an applicant. So make sure whoever it is you go to has had considerable success with deferred applicants as well.
Understood. Thank you so much. I also had one more question. Like, is there amongst the M7, is there any particular B school that Bitsians have an added advantage of, or abnormally high number of Bitsians have gone when compared to others? And how did you shortlist your particular school when you applied?
Yeah, I don't think any school has like an abnormally
Yeah.
amount of Vitsians. All of them have pretty high amount of Vitsians actually. How
Yeah.
did we shortlist is, again, as we mentioned in the session, you make your story, you pinpoint your career goals, what it is you're looking for. And then you look at the school's culture, the school's values, what is the school known for? Like Booth, Columbia, they're really known for finance. So if it's finance that you're looking for, they're great schools to go to. And as you mentioned, for Sloan, so it's like Berkeley is a great tech school to go to. So it's all about your goals. It's about the culture of the school. Kellogg is a very student-led school. There's a lot of focus on student-led activities, lots of collaboration. Columbia, on the other hand, is a very Cosmos school. It's New York City. That's their whole selling point. So whatever it is that you feel like you fit in with the best, that's how you shortlist them.
Makes
And
sense.
it's a very
Thank you so
important
much.
thing, actually. It makes a lot of difference that you go to the right school that is suited to you. A lot of people regret not doing that. So take that decision, I think prudently. Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.
I think we are done with questions here. It's well past time and it's a Sunday. So, firstly, thank you so much for taking time out on Sunday and like devoting 2 hours for this. And yeah, it was a great session, shared a lot of great insights, and I hope that people took a lot from this. Regarding the recording, it will be uploaded on Bitsa International's YouTube channel. So it will be done in a few days. And to whoever is still in the meet, there will be an application form that will be sent out to you guys. So you are required to fill that form, and there will be a compulsory task as well that you need to submit in order for the mentors to select the mentees. So just keep an eye out on your inboxes. And thank you for joining the session. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
guys.
much.
Bye.
All the
Great.
best.
Thanks, Shubham. Bye.
Thanks, Shubham.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.